the Pacific skies, vast and unyielding, became the crucible in which the fate of aerial combat was forged during the Second World War. Above the endless expanse of ocean and the scattered archipelagos, Allied and Japanese pilots engaged in a deadly ballet, their machines weaving through the cloud. The intensity of these early air battles over the Pacific was compounded by the strategic importance of the islands themselves. Each atoll and airstrip represented a critical foothold, a potential launch point for further operations or a bulwark against enemy advances. Control of the airspace above these territories was not merely a tactical concern but a strategic imperative. Pilots found themselves not only fighting for survival but also for the dominance of entire campaigns. The stakes elevated every encounter into a microcosm of the broader conflict, where the loss of a single squadron could ripple through the operational landscape. Within this context, the limitations of traditional detection methods became starkly apparent. Visual spotting, the primary means of identifying enemy aircraft, was inherently flawed by human perception and environmental variables. The vastness of the ocean meant that a single enemy formation could appear suddenly, leaving little time for reaction. The Japanese pilots' early advantage hinged on exploiting these vulnerabilities, striking before the Allies could marshal an effective response. The dense jungles and mountainous islands offered natural concealment, enabling enemy aircraft to approach undetected until the last possible moment. The Allied forces, initially at a disadvantage in this domain, recognized the imperative to develop new methods to counter the Japanese mastery of aerial tactics. Traditional reconnaissance and lookout posts, while valuable, were insufficient against the speed and surprise of modern air combat. The challenge was not merely to see the enemy but to see them early enough to shape the engagement on favorable terms. This requirement set the stage for the technological revolution that radar detection systems would soon inaugurate, promising to pierce the veil of Pacific skies and restore balance to a conflict defined by uncertainty and peril. Amidst these conditions, the human element remained paramount. Pilots on both sides endured the relentless psychological pressures of combat in an environment that magnified every risk. The isolation, the unpredictability of enemy action, and the unforgiving natural surroundings combined to create a crucible of stress and endurance. The stories of aviators who flew beyond their limits, sometimes returning against impossible odds, underscore the profound human dimension beneath the technological and tactical narratives. Each dogfight was a testament to individual courage shaped by the broader currents of war and innovation. The early phase of aerial combat in the Pacific thus stands as a testament to the interplay between environment, technology, and human skill. The Japanese pilots' initial dominance was not merely a product of their aircraft or training but a reflection of their ability to exploit the harsh realities of the theater, its vast distances, limited visibility, and fragile communication networks. Allied forces faced a daunting task: to overcome these challenges through innovation and adaptation, setting in motion a transformation that would redefine the nature of air warfare in this vast and deadly arena. As the Pacific War unfolded, the Allies confronted the stark reality that traditional methods of aerial detection were insufficient against the cunning and agility of Japanese forces. The vast expanse of ocean and the dense island chains demanded a revolutionary approach to reconnaissance, one that transcended the limitations of human sight and unreliable radio communication. It was in this crucible that radar technology emerged as a decisive instrument, promising to transform the calculus of aerial warfare by granting Allied forces the elusive advantage of early detection and situational awareness. The origins of Allied radar advancements trace back to the pioneering research conducted at institutions such as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Radiation Laboratory. Here, scientists and engineers worked feverishly to refine the principles of radio detection and ranging, pushing the boundaries of electromagnetic wave propagation and signal processing. The SCR-270 radar system, among the earliest deployed in the field, embodied this breakthrough. This ground-based radar could detect aircraft at distances exceeding 100 miles, a capability previously unimaginable in the Pacific theater's vastness. Its deployment on islands and aboard naval vessels extended the Allies' observational reach well beyond the horizon, allowing commanders to anticipate enemy movements with unprecedented precision. The evolution of radar did not halt at fixed installations. Recognizing the need for mobility and closer integration with air operations, the Allies developed airborne radar systems that could be fitted onto patrol aircraft and fighters. These systems, though initially limited in range and resolution, marked a critical step toward real-time aerial reconnaissance. By equipping aircraft with radar, crews could detect enemy formations even in poor visibility conditions, through clouds, darkness, or the blinding glare of the sun. This technological leap mitigated the Japanese advantage in surprise attacks and low-altitude approaches, eroding the tactical edge they had long enjoyed. Behind these technical achievements stood the relentless efforts of research laboratories and military innovators who understood that radar was not merely a tool but a force multiplier. The MIT Radiation Laboratory, in particular, played a pivotal role in advancing radar frequency modulation, improving antenna design, and refining signal clarity. These improvements enhanced detection range and accuracy, enabling operators to distinguish between friend and foe and to track multiple targets simultaneously. The integration of radar data into command centers allowed for more effective coordination of fighter interceptions and air defense measures, transforming isolated pilots into components of a cohesive, responsive network. The practical impact of these advancements was soon felt across the Pacific battlefront. On islands such as Guadalcanal and Midway, radar installations became critical nodes in the Allied defensive grid. Operators manning these stations maintained vigilant watches, scanning the skies for the faintest echoes of incoming Japanese aircraft. The data they provided allowed commanders to scramble fighters well before enemy formations entered visual range, shifting the tactical paradigm from reactive defense to proactive engagement. This early warning capability proved invaluable in preserving Allied air assets and disrupting Japanese attack plans. Moreover, the refinement of radar technology addressed the persistent challenge of night and low-visibility combat, conditions under which Japanese pilots had previously exploited their familiarity with the environment. With radar, Allied aircrews could detect and intercept enemy aircraft during hours of darkness or adverse weather, conditions that had previously rendered visual spotting ineffective. This capability expanded the temporal window during which the Allies could contest airspace, eroding the Japanese reliance on nocturnal and surprise raids. The psychological impact on Japanese pilots was significant, as the once invisible threat of Allied fighters now loomed with increasing inevitability. The integration of radar into Allied air operations also necessitated a transformation in command and control procedures. Radar operators became indispensable members of the aerial warfare apparatus, their real-time reports informing tactical decisions and sortie planning. The flow of information from radar stations to fighter squadrons created a dynamic battlefield network, enabling rapid responses to shifting threats. This networked approach contrasted sharply with earlier reliance on visual spotting and static observation posts, embodying a new era of electronic warfare where information dominance translated directly into combat effectiveness. However, the deployment of radar was not without challenges. Early systems were bulky, required skilled operators, and were vulnerable to environmental conditions such as humidity and tropical storms. Training personnel to interpret radar signals accurately demanded significant investment, and initial skepticism among some commanders delayed widespread adoption. Yet, as proven victories mounted, these obstacles were overcome, and radar became an indispensable asset. The Allies' commitment to research and development ensured continual improvements, with successive models offering greater range, resolution, and reliability. The contrast between Allied radar capabilities and Japanese countermeasures was stark. While the Japanese Navy and Army attempted to develop their own radar systems, these efforts lagged significantly behind in both technological sophistication and deployment scale. Japanese radar sets often suffered from limited range and poor reliability, restricting their utility in early warning and interception coordination. Consequently, Japanese forces remained heavily reliant on visual spotting and radio communication, vulnerabilities that the Allies increasingly exploited. This technological disparity compounded the operational challenges faced by Japanese aircrews, eroding their tactical freedom and increasing their exposure to Allied interception. The strategic implications of radar advancements extended beyond individual battles. The ability to detect enemy aircraft at extended ranges allowed Allied commanders to plan operations with greater confidence, reducing the element of surprise that had favored Japanese tactics. This shift enabled the formulation of more effective air defense networks around critical bases and fleet formations, contributing to the attrition of Japanese air power. Radar's role in the integration of air, naval, and ground operations underscored the emergence of a combined arms approach, where electronic intelligence became a cornerstone of battlefield awareness. In sum, the introduction and advancement of radar technology constituted a fundamental turning point in the Pacific War's aerial dimension. It transformed the elusive and unpredictable nature of air reconnaissance into a systematic, reliable process, granting Allied forces a critical advantage in the unforgiving vastness of the Pacific theater. The development of airborne and shipborne radar systems, coupled with the pioneering work of institutions such as the MIT Radiation Laboratory, reshaped the operational landscape. This technological progression not only countered Japanese fighter tactics but also heralded a new era in which electronic detection would underpin the future of air combat strategy. The Allies' radar detection advantage was no mere technical curiosity but a decisive instrument in the unfolding struggle for dominance in the skies above the Pacific. The advent of radar detection systems bestowed upon Allied air operations a tactical edge that fundamentally altered the dynamics of engagement with Japanese forces. Early warning capabilities, once a distant aspiration, became a practical reality, enabling commanders to orchestrate interceptions with a precision hitherto unattainable. This radar detection advantage did not merely improve reaction times, it redefined the strategic framework within which aerial combat unfolded across the sprawling Pacific theater. The integration of radar data into command and control centers facilitated an unprecedented level of coordination among Allied squadrons. Operators, perched before flickering cathode ray tubes and oscilloscopes, translated faint blips into actionable intelligence. Their reports, relayed swiftly via radio networks, allowed fighter units to be vectored towards incoming enemy formations well before visual contact. This proactive posture contrasted sharply with the reactive scramble tactics that had marked earlier confrontations. Commanders could now allocate interceptors with greater efficiency, concentrating forces where intelligence indicated the highest threat. The calculus of aerial dominance was being rewritten not merely by numbers of aircraft, but by unseen electromagnetic waves that penetrated the Pacific's vast and treacherous expanse. The Battle of Midway, a pivotal clash of naval and air power in June 1942, exemplified radar's profound tactical impact. As Japanese strike forces approached the island, Allied radar operators detected their arrival at ranges exceeding 100 miles, providing critical minutes for the hastily assembled fighter squadrons to take flight. This early warning enabled the U.S. Navy to position its carriers optimally, launching counterattacks that decimated the Japanese fleet. Radar's role was not peripheral but central. It turned the tide by negating the element of surprise that Japanese tactics had long exploited. The battle demonstrated unequivocally that technological dominance in detection could translate directly into battlefield victories, saving countless lives and preserving the strategic initiative. Beyond Midway, the Solomon Islands campaign further showcased how radar detection advantage reshaped air operations. The dense jungle canopy and mountainous terrain complicated visual reconnaissance, but radar installations on nearby islands provided continuous coverage of airspace. Allied fighters, guided by radar vectors, intercepted Japanese raids with increasing effectiveness. Night engagements, once perilous and rare, became feasible as radar illuminated enemy movements in darkness. The radical expansion of operational hours undermined Japanese fighter tactics that relied heavily on surprise and concealment. This shift not only improved Allied defensive capabilities but also emboldened offensive sorties, enabling strikes on enemy positions with reduced risk of ambush. The tactical implications extended to individual dogfights, where radar-equipped pilots and their controllers could anticipate enemy movements with greater accuracy. Rather than relying solely on visual spotting or chance encounters, Allied aviators were directed to intercept points with calculated precision. This coordination reduced wasted fuel and exposure, allowing fighters to engage on terms favorable to their strengths. Radar's influence permeated squadron tactics, fostering formations designed to maximize coverage and mutual support. The result was a more disciplined and effective air force, capable of sustaining prolonged campaigns in the face of determined Japanese resistance. Crucially, radar also mitigated the Japanese advantage in night and low-visibility flying conditions. Prior to its widespread adoption, such conditions rendered Allied air defenses largely impotent, allowing Japanese pilots to conduct raids with relative impunity. Radar detection systems illuminated the darkened skies, transforming nocturnal combat into a contested domain. This advancement forced Japanese aviators to revise their operational doctrines, confronting the reality that stealth and darkness no longer guaranteed safety. The psychological impact of this lost sanctuary cannot be overstated. It eroded morale and constrained tactical options, contributing to a gradual erosion of Japanese air superiority. The cumulative effect of these developments was a gradual but decisive shift in aerial combat dynamics. Japanese fighter tactics, once predicated on surprise and superior maneuverability, increasingly faltered against an adversary armed with superior situational awareness. Allied radar systems enabled a form of anticipatory warfare, where engagements could be initiated on terms favorable to the defenders. This technological dominance translated into higher survival rates for Allied pilots and greater attrition of Japanese aircraft and crews. Air superiority, a critical prerequisite for successful amphibious operations and fleet protection, became an achievable objective rather than an elusive aspiration. Yet, this transformation was not solely a product of hardware. The human element, training, doctrine, and organizational adaptation, played an indispensable role in harnessing radar's potential. Pilots and controllers underwent rigorous instruction to interpret radar information and translate it into effective tactical action. The establishment of centralized command centers facilitated real-time decision-making, integrating radar data with reconnaissance reports and intelligence assessments. This institutional evolution complemented technological advances, ensuring that the radar detection advantage was fully exploited in operational contexts. The Japanese response to these challenges was constrained by both technological and cultural factors. Their limited access to advanced radar systems and reluctance to overhaul established tactics left them vulnerable to the evolving Allied strategy. Attempts to adapt often came too late or were implemented unevenly, hampering their ability to counter the radar-enabled coordination of Allied forces. The disparity in electronic warfare capability became a defining feature of the aerial conflict, shaping engagement outcomes and strategic trajectories. In sum, radar detection advantage emerged as a critical determinant of Allied air operations in the Pacific War. By extending the reach of early warning systems and enabling precise fighter coordination, radar transformed the nature of aerial combat. The battles of Midway and the Solomon Islands stand as testament to the operational power conferred by this technological edge. Allied radar systems redefined the parameters of engagement, undermining Japanese fighter tactics and fostering a new paradigm of electronic dominance. This aerial combat edge was not merely a product of machines but of the integration of technology, training, and command that together forged a path to eventual victory in the Pacific skies. The introduction of radar into the Pacific theater forced a profound reckoning within Japanese air tactics, challenging deeply ingrained doctrines and unsettling the confidence of seasoned aviators. For years, Japanese pilots had operated under the assumption that stealth, surprise, and intimate knowledge of the environment granted them near absolute control of the skies. The sudden emergence of Allied radar detection advantage shattered this illusion, exposing their approaches to early electronic detection and interception, and compelling a reluctant adaptation under increasingly adverse conditions. Japanese fighter tactics, which had long relied on aggressive ambushes and surprise attacks launched from concealment or darkness, found themselves compromised. The early warning provided by Allied radar systems meant that formations could no longer approach undetected. The element of surprise, once a cornerstone of Japanese success, was systematically eroded. Pilots who had previously exploited the sun's glare or cloud cover to mask their advances found their positions illuminated by the invisible electronic eyes scanning the sky. The calculus of engagement shifted dramatically, forcing Japanese commanders to reconsider strategies that had delivered victories in earlier conflicts but now rendered their aircrews vulnerable. This tactical disruption had cascading effects on morale among Japanese aircrews. The psychological burden of knowing that the Allies could detect and vector fighters well before visual contact introduced a pervasive sense of vulnerability. The once vaunted stealth approaches transformed into perilous gambits, with pilots aware that their chances of achieving surprise attacks were diminishing. Accounts from surviving Japanese aviators reveal a growing frustration and a sense of inevitability, as the skies they once dominated became arenas where the unseen radar waves dictated the tempo and outcome of battle. This erosion of confidence undermined the aggressive spirit that had fueled their early successes. Compounding these tactical and psychological challenges was the broader strategic disadvantage faced by Japanese forces due to their limited access to radar technology. Unlike the Allies, whose research and industrial capacities enabled rapid development and deployment of advanced radar systems, Japanese efforts lagged significantly. Early Japanese radar sets suffered from limited range, poor resolution, and unreliable operation, restricting their utility in early warning and interception coordination. This technological gap left Japanese commanders reliant on visual spotting and radio communication, methods increasingly outmatched by the Allies' electronic networks. The disparity in radar capabilities manifested starkly in operational outcomes. Japanese formations, deprived of comparable early warning, found themselves vulnerable to preemptive strikes and ambushes orchestrated by radar-informed Allied fighters. The inability to detect incoming enemy aircraft with sufficient lead time constrained Japanese tactical options, often forcing reactive rather than proactive engagements. This imbalance not only increased attrition rates among Japanese pilots and aircraft but also strained command structures struggling to adapt to an environment dominated by electronic detection. Efforts to adapt Japanese tactics to counter radar detection proved uneven and often too late to stem the tide. Some commanders attempted to emphasize dispersion and lower altitude approaches to evade radar coverage, while others experimented with night flying and electronic countermeasures. However, these adaptations were hampered by inadequate training, limited technological support, and doctrinal inertia. The deeply ingrained culture of valor and aggressive engagement also conflicted with more cautious or evasive tactics, limiting the flexibility required to respond effectively to the new threat posed by radar. The psychological toll on Japanese aircrews was further compounded by the increasing frequency of engagements where the advantage decisively favored the Allies. As radar-enabled interceptions became routine, Japanese pilots faced a growing mortality rate that strained morale and recruitment. The loss of experienced aviators, who were difficult to replace given Japan's limited pilot training infrastructure, eroded the qualitative edge that had once characterized their forces. This attrition was not merely a statistic but a cultural and operational blow, diminishing the confidence and effectiveness of remaining units. Moreover, the broader strategic context exacerbated these challenges. As the Allies expanded their radar networks and refined integration with air operations, Japanese forces found themselves increasingly outmatched in both detection and response. The lack of comparable electronic warfare capabilities meant that Japanese commanders could not disrupt or deceive Allied radar systems effectively. This technological inferiority contributed to a growing sense of strategic encirclement and inevitability, as the Pacific skies became increasingly dominated by an adversary wielding superior electronic eyes. The culmination of these factors underscored a critical shift in the nature of aerial combat over the Pacific. The invisible signals that had once been a secret advantage became the harbingers of survival and destruction alike. Japanese fighter tactics, once predicated on mastery of the physical environment and human skill, were rendered vulnerable to a new dimension of warfare defined by electromagnetic detection and rapid information exchange. The cultural ethos that had valorized aggressive engagement was challenged by the cold calculus of technological dominance, forcing a painful reckoning with the realities of modern combat. In this light, the impact of radar extends beyond mere technology. It symbolizes the broader transformation of warfare in the 20th century. The Japanese experience in the Pacific illustrates how technological disparities can translate into strategic and psychological disadvantages, shaping not only the outcomes of battles but the very character of military culture and doctrine. The loss of tactical freedom and the erosion of morale induced by Allied radar detection advantage contributed significantly to the gradual unraveling of Japanese air power. Thus, the legacy of radar in the Pacific War is inseparable from the story of adaptation and resistance faced by Japanese forces. It highlights the critical importance of technological parity and innovation in determining the fortunes of war. As Japanese pilots confronted the relentless gaze of Allied radar, they found their once effective fighter tactics eclipsed by an invisible but omnipresent force, altering the trajectory of the conflict and underscoring the inexorable rise of electronic warfare as a decisive factor in modern aerial combat. Radar's pivotal role in securing Allied air superiority in the Pacific War cannot be overstated. It was not merely an incremental improvement in detection capability but a transformative force that reshaped the very nature of aerial warfare across the vast oceanic expanse. By extending the reach of early warning systems and enabling precise coordination among fighter squadrons, radar provided the Allies with an aerial combat edge that decisively shifted the balance of power in their favor. The strategic impact of radar was evident in the cumulative effect it had on campaign outcomes. From the critical victories at Midway to the protracted Solomon Islands campaign, the integration of radar detection systems allowed Allied forces to transition from reactive defense to proactive offense. This shift enabled the preservation of precious air assets and facilitated attrition of Japanese air power through timely interceptions and coordinated strikes. Radar's contribution was not confined to isolated battles but permeated the operational fabric of the Pacific theater, underpinning a sustained campaign of air dominance. This technological dominance underscored the vital importance of innovation and electronic warfare in modern combat. Radar detection advantage was emblematic of a broader trend where control of information became as crucial as control of physical terrain. The ability to perceive the enemy before being perceived transformed command and control, enabling a synthesis of intelligence, rapid decision-making, and tactical execution. Allied forces leveraged this integration to optimize resource allocation, reduce pilot casualties, and enhance mission effectiveness, exemplifying the emergent paradigm of networked warfare. Moreover, radar's legacy extends beyond its immediate wartime utility to its profound influence on post-war military doctrine and technology development. The success of radar in the Pacific galvanized further investment in electronic detection and countermeasures, laying the groundwork for the sophisticated air defense and surveillance systems that would dominate Cold War military strategy. The lessons learned from integrating radar into complex air operations informed the evolution of joint command structures and the prioritization of electronic intelligence in subsequent conflicts. From a cultural perspective, radar's influence also marked a shift in the ethos of air combat. No longer was success solely the product of pilot skill, daring, or machine performance. Instead, victory increasingly depended on the capacity to harness technological tools that extended human senses and decision-making capabilities. This shift introduced a new dimension to aerial warfare, where electronic dominance became a critical determinant of survival and success. The human element, while still vital, was now inseparable from the technological infrastructure supporting it. The transformation wrought by radar detection advantage thus encapsulates the intersection of technology, strategy, and human endeavor. It highlights how innovation can redefine the parameters of conflict, compelling adversaries to adapt or face obsolescence. The Allied air superiority achieved in the Pacific was not an accident of circumstance but the product of deliberate investment, rigorous training, and the effective integration of radar into operational doctrine. This combination forged an aerial combat edge that proved insurmountable for Japanese forces constrained by technological and organizational limitations. Ultimately, radar's decisive contribution to the Pacific War serves as a testament to the irreversible transformation of military affairs in the 20th century. It exemplifies how mastery of the electromagnetic spectrum became a foundational element of combat power, presaging the centrality of electronic warfare in future conflicts. The Allied victory in the Pacific skies, secured in large measure through radar's capabilities, embodies the broader narrative of technological adaptation shaping the course of history. In this light, radar stands as both a symbol and instrument of a new era in warfare, one defined by information dominance, technological innovation, and the relentless pursuit of tactical and strategic advantage.